You need me for anything else? Because I got to get ready. I'm doing it right now. I'm just getting started. I'm headed upstairs. I got to find some headphones. Okay, have a great time.
Yeah. This is what I wasn't going to.
Does it bother you if I do this in the other room instead of upstairs? Yeah. Dane, how are you? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us. Sorry I had to move locations here.
Yeah, no worries. I'm cameraless tonight.
Okay, well, we've got your smiling face, if nothing else.
Chubby cheeks.
Well,
How you
I
doing,
understand
man?
that. I'm in that same crowd.
How are you doing? You, man, talk about a rough last couple of months.
You know, it's been interesting. Hang on one second. I'm going to get a headphone on here now that I've plugged it in and didn't untangle it. I'll unplug for a minute. You know, you don't get to pick your trials. That's the one thing I've learned. And, you know, I appreciate more than ever the wisdom and the Lord teaching us to look out for each other, people that helped and everything else. And then the virtue of my perspective is that there were lots of tender mercies along the way, but I could have been worse. I could have, literally either lost a leg or been dead in a 48-hour time period after what we got started with. So I am very grateful, and it's humbling, and it's good to know that the Lord's in our lives and He watches out for us. So I guess that's kind of, with a little bit of time under my belt, that's my perspective.
Yikes! Yeah, that's so. You are you 100% or what?
Oh no. The leg is still healing. There's still some pockets of liquid which are infection possibilities, and those we are just going to have to deal with as we go. So I'm grateful for kind of every day and being able to, make good things happen, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Wow, what a crazy situation.
But then I realized, one of my aha moments was I was at the doctor's office and heading up to his office, and two people came out of an elevator that had no leg at all. So I'm going, okay, I can't complain.
Yeah, there you go.
So there's plenty of folks worse off than I am. But again, my feel bad for your class. I've not been nearly as attentive as I'd like to be, and I'm way behind on grading.
Oh, but, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it, because mine still shows an A, although I know it's not an A. So it's nice to look at it and be like, oh, I got an A,
So just keep it that way, right?
Security I got going right now.
Okay, well, I'll try not to break it too badly. How's that?
No, it's going to be ugly. It's just been a tough semester for me. Just not as tough as yours, but it's been nutty.
Yeah, well, you know what? It seems to happen a lot. It seems that winter semesters, and I'm saying plural, lots of life things happen to a lot of people. Fall semester, everybody loves fall. You get the holidays, and we tend to either we put a good smile on it, or it really is that way. Spring is spring, and hope spring's eternal. And other places beside Arizona, most people are thrilled that spring is there. We get depressed when spring comes because it lasts all of a week, and it goes from 70 to 90 in about 3 days.
Right.
But I think winter semester in general brings more trials to people, and it's not just me. It seems like that's just the case. So
that doesn't surprise me, and it's just I don't know. It's been that way for me this year. So.
Yeah, spring semester is tough because everybody wants to go play. But as far as adversity and opposition, winter semester is pretty much untouchable. I mean, it really seems to be that way. And unfortunately, sometimes it even includes, travel accidents and things like that in places that, hasn't been in our class, but that's happened in other classes I've had before. And, there's just stuff that happens in the winter. So. Yeah. Remind me what you do. Are you a full-time student, or are you doing this?
Something else? I foolishly bit off more than I can chew. I started last semester, and I did okay full-time, and so I thought, because I just wanted to get it done,
right.
Getting close. Just wanted to get it done, and so I did the same thing this semester. But I work full-time, and I have a very demanding career. I'm in construction management, and.
You said construction management?
Correct, yeah.
What kind of construction do you do? Because that's the kind of work I do, too.
Yeah, federal contracting solely.
For issuing contracts or executing those?
Executing. So, general contractor.
Okay.
I've worked as a project manager, senior project manager, and this last few months, it's been a little bit crazy, and I've had to. I left a company, and then went to an old place I used to work for, and then within a few days of that, I got an offer to open up an office here in San Diego for a new contract, and which was a great opportunity for me, and so while it's been a turmoil last couple of months for a number of reasons. For work, this new opportunity is just unbelievable. So,
what kind of a contract is it you're doing?
This company got a $30 million 5-year JOC for the naval bases. So
Okay.
federal, contracting and
A little bit, yes. I mean, I've been in construction for 12 years now, so I
yeah,
know a little bit about it.
yeah. So they were, they're actually out of Utah, and but they've got contracts all over the country,
Hmm.
and it was just sheer luck that we kind of came across each other, and they were looking for somebody to head up their office down here, and it was just really the right timing and the right people, and so yeah, it's a good opportunity. It's kicking off crazy. We're already getting a lot of stuff going, and just happy to be involved in it.
What kind of work are you doing? Like building construction or roads
Yeah,
or?
yeah, yeah. So it's all building construction. Well, not just buildings. I mean, I don't know what you're talking about. Civil engineering stuff too. A lot of
Okay.
underground. I just finished up a dam renovation project down in El Paso for my previous company. Uh,
So
you know,
you go either to company specific projects or you go join a company to do a project, correct?
Well, yeah, so I'm usually with a company, and then we just continue to work on getting projects. And the last company, just as an employee or, that sort of relationship. And it just so happened that the last company I was with, which was a really great run, we did, I probably did 20 to 30 million dollars worth of work in 3 years for them, and it was very profitable. It was a great deal. And then but then we had some management changeover, and it just wasn't a good situation for me. So
Hmm.
I kind of ended up on the outs on that one, and that's really what precipitated my semester kind of going downhill for.
Well,
So
I have a perspective on the school part, and especially when you've got a career like you've got, Dane, and anybody else that's going to end up listening to this, I would add that same thing for them. Sometimes it's just getting through. And if and I'm not saying it's going to happen in this class, but if you pull out a C in a class, it's not the end of the world. You're got the credit. You're going to move on. You've learned some things. Sometimes you just have to balance things out that way. And I'm not saying that makes you a bad student or anything else like that, but especially when that's all you can do, that's all you can do.
yeah, yeah, and that's kind of been it. When I first started a couple of years ago, and I kind of threw all my credits back because we lived in Arizona for a long time. I was in a program at ASU for a long
Okay.
time, didn't quite finish, and then of course you have to start over and get the whole 60 credit hours again. So it's been a lot of school, trying to get to this finish line. But yeah, that's at first I was doing straight A's. I was really worried about straight A's, just from a personal standpoint.
Sure.
But I tell you what, in the last couple of semesters, if I can get a 70%, I'm relieved. Just
Well,
happy.
and that's okay because I mean there may be some students listening to this that are horrified, but and I'm not advocating you don't do your best, but
Yeah.
when you have life, I'm assuming you're married and or with kids.
Oh yeah, married, 4 kids, busy
Yeah.
life.
And perhaps a church calling to go along with that,
Right.
and
Yeah.
you know, and school, you got to balance that out because you can only do what you can do, and but that doesn't mean it's not progress. It's still moving forward in progress, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Here's what I tell my kids, and two of mine are still at BYU Idaho. One's graduated from there. I said, if your GPA is right at or close to a B, you're doing pretty darn good.
Yeah, yeah. I guess there for a little while I was really thinking about graduate school, just because I really enjoy being in school. I mean, aside
Hmm.
from the extra level of insanity that it causes, it's a great blessing. It's just
Right.
a great blessing in your life. I can't stress that enough.
And I agree with that from an instruction point of view too. So
Yeah, and so I've really been tossed around this idea of it'd be nice to go back and maybe get an MBA or something, nice and easy again. But now with my grades and because they really look at that last year with my
sure.
grades kind of waning, I don't know if I'd be able to get into the type of institution that I'd like to go to. So I think I'm gonna just let that go. But who knows? Who knows what's gonna happen?
Finish what you've got in hand and finish that bachelor's degree and go
Yeah,
from there. And then you can always do that later if you choose to.
yeah.
So there's no shame in that at all, none whatsoever. Hello, Bridget. Glad to have you join us.
Thank you.
Hey, did that discussion work out from yesterday for your daughter?
She told me she was going to view it tonight, so I
Oh,
haven't heard
okay.
back from
Okay.
her.
Okay.
She doesn't have to give an answer for another week, so she's got some
Okay.
time.
Got some time.
Yeah.
All right. And I am trying to give me 1 second. And Dane, if you're okay with that, I'm going to leave our conversation on the recorded tape because I think that can be beneficial for a lot of people.
Oh yeah, it doesn't bother me at all.
So, Bridget, we were chatting about school and work and some personal things there. So I appreciate you joining us. I'm going to, like I said, try to get to the class itself, and for some reason I am not able to get there. I'll have to play for just a second here. Give me 1 minute. I realized I had a lot of windows open today. Okay, let's try this again. I'm almost there. I'll use the excuse that Dane distracted me. I don't know if it's my computer or I learned, but things have been a little slow opening up here. Okay. All right. Thank you guys for joining, and again, we'll have this advertised and broadcast to the rest of the class. And again, Dane, thank you for letting us keep that discussion because I think you will not be the only one that benefits from that. I do have a quick spiritual thought I will add for our office hour tonight, and I am going to share that spiritual thought out of the book of Jonah. And I like the book of Jonah because I think just like the prophet Joseph Smith allowed us to look at some of the mistakes he had in life, Jonah allows that same thing. Jonah was called, and maybe you guys can help me remember this, twice to go cry repentance to the city of Nineveh. And basically he said, I don't think so. I think I'm going to get on this boat and go the other way. And I think about that, you know, what would happen if President Monson did that or anything else? But he was called by the Lord to go deliver a message, but the Lord didn't give up on him. But he didn't make it easy for him either. And I think that when you look at the harrowing adventure he had on a ship, horrible storm, swallowed by a whale, vomited out on the beach, you know, he was rebuked by the Lord in multiple cases. But if you look at that also, he was able to change and able to do what he was told. And I'm looking for a specific verse here to read. Anyway, I think that the reason I wanted to share that spiritual thought is that I think that so many times in our lives, you know, we view everybody else as being perfect, or everybody else, and this kind of goes along, Dane, with our discussion, everybody else is having smooth sailing, but there are times that we make our life more complicated by not listening to what the Lord tells us. And I think the key with this is that I would look at is that would Jonah's life have been easier if he'd have done what the Lord wanted to do in the first place? I think we know the answer would be yes. The other message is, does the Lord allow second and third and fourth chances? And if you apply the atonement to this and to us, how many times do we, and this is all of us in our class, the three of us that are here, do we have problems that we can't conquer right away? I think of someone that has an addiction, either to something that's a personal behavior or a substance, etc., and they try and try and try and try and try, even dozens of times, but they don't give up. And I think that when you look at that, a little bit of what Jonah had is in all of us, that we many times turn away from the Lord, but with his atonement, I think we have the opportunity to repent, certainly, and the atonement that allows us to be enabled to do things that we, instead of doing the wrong thing for the 15th time, maybe we figure out what the atonement is and how the Lord can enable us to do those things that are hard, and maybe on the 15th time we fix it, or we break that habit, or we do something that we haven't been able to do. And I'm grateful that Jonah had that account that he was able to share with us, as short as a book as that is, to give us an idea that there's hope for that. And I say that in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
So at least in my mind, I can relate to Jonah. There's been many times that I've not listened to the Lord's voice, and there's been consequences for that. I'm not quite sure they've been quite that dramatic, but still there. All right, Dane, since you're our lone class representative, did the instructions that were finally put up did those make sense to you on the organized labor discussion for this week?
I was a little confused at first, and I went back and read them again today because I thought I'd first seen that we were maybe like splitting the whole class.
Yeah, and that was my mistake. There's one of my Jonah moments here.
So I was getting some texts from my group, and it was a little bit confusing to me. So I had to go back and look at it, and I thought, oh, okay, that makes more sense. So yeah, I think I've got it figured out.
All right.
Now I avoided looking at the opposing team's information. I don't know if that's right or what.
That probably works. Yeah, that works. And again, the intent is to try to have two sides to discuss that. And then, right. Did it come across that you're supposed to have that discussion in your group and then report on how that went?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, good. I think so. And then we'll have two different leaders. Each one will report from their perspective. Correct.
Correct. All right. Okay. I wanted to take a little time, if I could, tonight to talk about two things. One is we are rapidly approaching the end of the semester. We have another semester hypothetical problem, doohickeys problem due on week 11, which is the end of next week. And the one after that I wanted to share just with the class is that in week 13 we have another paper due, another doohickeys paper. We do not have normal class. So there's no other, we have the final and a doohickeys paper due. There's no other additional discussions that go along with that. So Dane, just for you and anybody else that's listening, that's important to know. And the paper in week 13 is half as long. So you're going to cut that in half. And instead of having 4 problems with 4 solutions each, you're going to have 2 problems with 4 solutions, or 4 problems with 2, whatever. Instead of that magic number being 16, it's going to be 8. So it's half as long. And what most people do is just do that out of week 12 content, which would be, Bridget, help me with that. That's not safety, is it?
I don't have it up right now.
I can, give me 1 second, I'll get there.
Okay.
Can check again. I have it right here.
Actually, I do have it up. It's Workplace and Society.
That's right. So what most people do is have that meaning half as long, and then you're going to do it just on that Workplace and Society, not on 2 weeks worth of material. Again, Dane, you're my guinea pig. Does that narrative make sense on what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I got it. That makes sense.
So it's the same amount of credit, just half as much work, because you've got basically only the final and that in week 13. Week 12 is the same. So again, to recap, week 11 there's a normal doohickeys paper. Week 13 a normal doohickeys paper, but it's half as long, and the final exam, and no class during week 13.
Okay.
The other thing I would add is that I shared this with Dane at the beginning, and Bridget, I can echo this with you and the rest of the class, is that I am still way behind on grading. I will get that done. My apologies. And it will be done by the end of the semester. That is not normal. It is not correct. It is not where I want to be, but considering circumstances, I am going to do the best I can, and we'll certainly get it done in time for everyone's grade. So, Bridget, anything else you want to add, either on just kind of a note on our process and the procedure of the class between now and the end?
I'm just glad to hear that the assignment for week 10 made sense.
Okay.
And if it doesn't, and anyone has questions, they can certainly ask them on the community, and we'll get them answered.
And thank you for your assistance there. You
Sure.
understand exactly what I mean. So, all right. Well, let's talk about organized labor. Dane, I'm going to pick on you again. You're probably going to regret you came on board tonight.
Oh, go for it.
Do you use organized labor, union companies, or others in your contracting when you use that from a federal perspective?
Yes, but it doesn't apply as that often because the federal agencies use prevailing wage, Davis-Bacon rates, and so generally that's pretty equivalent to whatever the union shops are paying. Sometimes it's more, and you know, we have to make sure that the union wage is accounted for.
How many times I'm going to address what that means, what you just said, but how many times would you use a union company in percentage? 20%, 50%, 80%?
It's fairly low. I would say it only is going to apply with some of the higher end trades like electricians, maybe HVAC, mechanical type trades, plumbers, potentially. But that would be it.
Okay. And Dane just mentioned for everybody else in the class, Davis-Bacon or prevailing wage. Just so you know that when you have a federal contract has built-in higher wages. And I'll call it what you want there. There are acts and laws that go along with that. Again, the ones that are the main ones are a prevailing wage, which is a rate set either by the state or the federal. There's a group that sets those rates. I'm not sure who exactly it is. So if I would get paid $12 an hour to be an electrician, on average that would be something like $18, maybe $20 an hour, where it's a significantly higher rate. That is paid for by the federal government as part of their contracts, and yes, you and I pay for that, because their intent is to say, I want not only skilled workers, but I want these workers to be compensated fairly. Davis-Bacon wages are basically the same thing, and those wages also can include a plus or a inclusion for benefits. So either a person has benefits already with their company and they give additional dollars, or if they don't have benefits, they provide dollars for them. So in essence, they could go out and purchase that if they chose, although very few people ever do. So what I'm going to do is take just a few minutes and with my great audience here, kind of talk about, and Bridget, you can certainly join in with your experience. In an academic sense, we should at least be fair and say there's pros and cons to organized labor. Now, I have to put on my HR hat because I am not an organized labor person. I do not like organized labor, and I'm going to just admit that right up front. I think it's a problem, and I think it's a concern, and I think in its day it was a great opportunity, but it is one that is typically and trended down almost in every industry. Maybe the hospitality industry and some other places it isn't, and there are probably still some things they do. But again, I'm going to do my best to put those biases aside, but I wanted to admit them right up front, and talk about the pros and cons of what a union does. And again, you guys jump in if you have any thoughts on that. A union generally, or organized labor, if you will have people that will band together collectively, and things like work assignments, pay, discipline, and many other things are required in one way, shape, or form, some heavy, some light, to be funneled through that third-party organization. So, for example, the United Auto Workers, I believe almost all of our major auto industry is unionized. So when someone is trying to build something, it may be direct communication between an employee and a superintendent, but many times it's to that union person and back, especially in areas of discipline, pay, etc. And so what that intent is that the union assists the worker and hopefully doesn't get in the way of the company of being able to get work done using an additional communication piece, I guess, or an additional helper or additional assistance or whatever you want to call it, to where somebody is there either with or between the employee and management. The positives to that can be less either harassment or unfair firing. It can be where employees get better wages or better fringe benefits that are negotiated by the union. And in some cases, especially in construction, and Dane, you might want to add into this, the unions do provide a union, what they call a union hall, where jobs are assigned through. So if I wanted to go hire some earth movers and a couple electricians and this kind of thing, I just go to the union hall and say, hey, I need this. And they'll provide skilled people, and that is one very positive function they serve, at least in the construction industry. Dane, would you add anything to that?
Yeah. In fact, that's probably one of the few situations that I can think of where an employer, a management team, may really benefit from having that because they don't have to lay people off. They can say, hey, we can use this labor force for this particular job. We're done with the job. Now you go back to the union hall, right. And there's no adverse effects on the company. So yeah, that's true. One nice benefit. And
that also typically works well for the worker because they can go from job to job and have some consistency. The tricky part, though, and I hear this a lot in our world, and again, I live in Arizona, which is not exactly a heavy union state, is that the guys that work out of the union hall, or gals for that matter, don't have much work because a lot of companies are avoiding that, doing their own hiring, etc., whether that's for lower wages or not. And so that union hall concept that used to be alive and well is probably not as robust as it used to be. Yeah, let me give you a little insight. Please. Something I talked about today. And let me, California is not really heavily union either, although it's certainly not what Arizona is. So today I was talking with our new contract administrator person, and I was explaining to her the prevailing wage, and we were talking about carpet. We had a job that has some carpeting that gets done, and I was talking about hiring some guys just to do it rather than subbing it out. And I said, hey, let's go look at the Davis wage sheet on this, and we looked it up, and with the fringe, this is for a guy that installs carpet, and it's not, with the fringe rate that you were talking about before, with the benefits and everything, it was somewhere in the neighborhood. I think it was 29 and 12. So it was like 39, 42, and 52 cents. I think it was $42.52 an hour.
For a guy to lay carpet. Now in Arizona, which I've done a lot of jobs there in Arizona as well, the rate for that is probably around $12, even Davis-Bacon. So you can see where a pro right to work government has really limited the how much that price has risen, and it stayed pretty low. And in a way, although it's really tough from my standpoint, because obviously I want to get everything as cheap as possible, man, at $12 an hour, I kind of feel bad for some of these guys working at some of these places. So there's that side, and I'm not very positive about unions myself, but it's certainly $12 an hour, even in Arizona, isn't a living wage.
No, $12 an hour anywhere isn't a living wage.
Right.
But I think that when you look at this, historically, unions had a huge hand, and in some emerging countries, that's still the case now. Some of this is happening in China and other places. When employers and this kind of, I'll apply this to now and previous. When employers treat employees badly and they get a union, the way us HR people talk about it is they deserved it. In the way I look at this is, if an employee feels bullied, abused, taken advantage of by a company, and they have to look elsewhere for help, almost always the company deserves what they get, because they did not treat their employees fairly, so they had to go somewhere else to find fair treatment. So even in today's world, or you go back to the early 1900s when working conditions were so poor and child labor was such a rampant thing, and people worked all day for a few dollars, unions had a huge influence on society and, for my mind, provided a great benefit. And today, if you've got an employer that does not take care of their people, then the union still steps in and provides probably a function that says, hey, you know, they elected us to be here. You, Mr. Company, have to pay attention to us now because you've not been treating your workers correctly.
Yeah, you know, and I agree with you. Going back kind of historically, you know, we had some of the, you know, the periods in the 1900s with some of these great reforms, and a lot of that was driven from with the unions and their safety. And what's happened, though, I think over time, is that, at least in this country and probably most developed countries, is that that the laws of land have really caught up with those types of demands. Mm-hmm. So now the government in general has really given those protections that the unions were providing before, and so in many cases the unions really they don't really have as much need, one, and two, they end up becoming, I think, in many cases, a much bigger detriment than a benefit, as they were when they were really pushing for those reforms.
And again, agree with that, because, you know, we don't have, at least I certainly hope we don't, there aren't sweatshops on every corner, and I'm sure those things exist, but, you know, child labor laws, most people don't put kids to work. Now, farming and family businesses can have some exceptions to this, and they're probably appropriate exceptions, but, you know, most people are probably safe on the job, most people are paid at least the minimum wage, and issues that go along with that, so that can be a look at that. Now, again, continuing on the positive side, unions have morphed into very more niche or specialty areas. Like, for example, I know that in Las Vegas and other places where it's heavily hospitality industry, there's unionization that probably makes sense for people because they were probably making, at best, minimum wage, and now folks that clean rooms and do things like that that are somewhat menial tasks can make a living wage and do some things that are different than they were previously. So the other thing I would add is that that's part of the discussion that you guys are going to have this week is it good to have a union? Is it not? And I'm going to try to give both sides of that, and I'm trying to be doing the positive side of that first. Bridget, you've been quiet. Anything you want to add based on knowing the class or what you've read?
I really don't have any experience with unions except the memories of my grandfather working in the coal mines and when he would go on strike. But other than that, it's just all very interesting to listen to what you have to say and to.
So, from your memory of your grandfather, the strike was a good thing or a bad thing?
It was probably a two-way sword because they were without money. They were on strike. Unless I'm incorrect, they weren't getting paid from the union.
Sometimes the union would chip in a small amount.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, based on your dues, they sometimes have like a small amount that they can maintain, like a percentage of your wage for a few months if you happen to go on strike.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think the other thing that I would say that a positive is that we live in a country that is free, and our laws allow these things to happen. In some countries where there's oppressive regimes, people that stand up for their rights or choose to do things like that are either bullied or hurt or injured or even killed in some cases, and our Constitution and the laws of the land allow us to be able to say, hey, look, I'm not happy with this, and others can assist me with that process. So hopefully there's some thoughts on the other side, the positive side of what that does with the union. some of the concerns on union representation is they take away from a company's ability to run their own company. Some companies, the most recent example is Hostess that I can think of. It was a big, well-publicized one. A lot of us like Twinkies, and if you go back and look at the Hostess union issue, the Hostess company was so burdened, again, I'm giving the management side here, not the employee side, so burdened by union issues and rules and regulations that they couldn't function and make a profit. So they shut the company down. If you remember back in the 80s, again, most of you won't remember that, President Reagan and the air traffic controls, it's a pretty famous case study, he basically said, I'm sorry, the unions are not here anymore, we're going to get rid of this, and if you don't like it, you're fired, and fired a lot of folks, and put the whole air traffic control system into an interesting perspective for a while, and by all accounts, by most accounts, he won that battle and was able to take the union work out of there and hopefully make a better and safer and more productive air traffic control organization. And my point is that the real knock on unions, no matter how you slice it, is instead of the ability to communicate person to person, you add a third thing into that. So I have to come here first before I can go talk to my peers, not my peers, my boss or other things. And it doesn't work exactly that way 100%, but it does work that way a fair amount, where you've got a middleman. Again, just if you had to picture everything you had to go to your boss for to go through a third party, and that's probably an extreme example, it doesn't always work that way, but that's really the issue that says I can't go to my boss or my boss can't come to me. Again, part of that's because the employees voted for it, and they say I'm going to go here to the union person, to the boss, especially on things like termination, discipline, and etc. The other part is it really makes terminating people very difficult, and that's one of the things that HR people really have a struggle with. And there's a perfect example, one that I think is fairly recent, where a union in an auto parts, auto manufacturing plant, the gentleman that was the employee was caught multiple times for being under the influence of marijuana on the job. Not just once, not just twice, multiple times. And the union stuck up for him and made him keep his job. It was like 3 years before they could fire this person. And again, the gist of it was, hey, you can't prove this, and the things that go along with that. And the automaker's comment was, he's a danger to himself, to others, and this is something that needs to be fixed. And the unions fought it and fought it and fought it, even for something as blatant as multiple drug offenses on the job. Not just like, hey, I disagree with my boss. This is failed a drug test, failed a drug test, failed a drug test, and still employed for years upon years upon years. And that's a fairly famous case. I don't know the exact name of it, but it's one that's been discussed for a long time. So
let me ask a question on that. Mm-hmm. So say, for instance, that his intoxication caused a safety issue that actually harmed other people. Okay, somehow somebody else was harmed. It sounds to me like the company would be liable at that point.
It's not the union; it's the company.
And that's a really precarious place to be in.
The company is liable, even though they would choose to do something different, but they didn't have the option because the union wouldn't let them.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very problematic. And again, that's why companies are very concerned about this. And one thing I would add that's a very recent development is President Obama and the National Labor Relations Board
I know about this.
Have put in something they call a quick strike rule. Used to be you had, and I should know the amount of time, but I don't remember it. Used to have a fairly long amount of time between the election was called and the election was held. And the President and the National Labor Relations Board have shortened that significantly. So basically, where employers don't have a chance to mount a defense, that's the employer's perspective on this.
Oh, see, I was thinking there was something else that I just heard today.
Okay, go ahead.
It's only so Obama's trying to he's trying to create the Asia Pacific Free Trade Agreement right now, and the unions obviously they're not happy with this situation, but essentially they really don't have much that they can do, but they're going to continue to try to block this because obviously, and this is kind of the issue with a lot of things, but the auto industry is one. Tariffs and other regulations regarding trade are allow those wages to be propped up because in a global free trade environment, it's impossible to compete with some of the wages that we have in other parts of the world. Not just from a labor standpoint, but that's just the way that it is. But I just heard that today.
And that means goods and services that are produced by those people are not competitive. And the companies cannot be competitive, which means that's more jobs that cost. If you're talking about a U.S. company trying to export and they have labor costs that are higher than another company that is not required to live by those laws, it really makes things interesting and difficult. So I guess my summary in looking at both of these pieces is there's a pro and con to both. Please don't give you the impression that it isn't. Unions have been on the decline for a long time. There are still some of them that are alive and well. There are still some that are struggling. And whether you like them or not, they are an interesting dynamic that complicates, good or bad, the relationship between employers and employees. And I'll come back to what I said earlier. Almost always, when a company receives a union, it's because they deserve it. And this is, again, an anecdotal comment HR people use a lot, meaning you got a union because you weren't treating people well, you were doing something that you weren't paying them enough, you weren't giving them enough benefits, you weren't helping them have a good work environment. So the employees felt like they needed to step out and get some help. So it's not all a bad thing against the unions. Part of this is companies need to make sure that the last thing on an employee's mind is, why would I do that? I love working here. My company's good to me. They pay me well. They provide a safe environment, etc. And so I think that's important to remember as we go forward, is that it really is a you get one if you deserve it type of thing. So any other comments from either of you?
Not really. I got all kinds of things with unions, but just goofy things, but not really relevant.
Okay. Bridget, anything else you'd add?
No, it's very interesting. I've learned a lot today.
Okay. Well, and again, hopefully this will help a little bit in your discussions. The readings are interesting and effective, and again, hopefully that discussion at the beginning of the class on what we're doing for week 13 will be helpful. So, Dane, a special thank you. Thank you for being here. Thanks for taking the time and adding a lot to our conversation. And we'll go from there. Bridget, can you hang on for just a second after we finish up here?
I can, yes.
All right,
Okay.
guys.
Dane, thank you much.
Good night, team.
Right.